This is Life Transformation Radio. Prepare to engage. Seatbelt activated. Download initiated. Your quantum journey of transformation begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Life Transformation Radio. Hi, I'm Rob Actis, best-selling author of The Law of Action, voice actor, business mindset coach, the podcast whisperer, and Mr. Action himself. Here at Life Transformation Radio, we are committed to share more about real life, love, the power of positivity, romance, and of course, laughter. We care about helping others find their internal drive and purpose. We celebrate life's challenges and overcoming them. On the show, my guests are amazing people who are forces for good in the world around them and live a life of transformation. My guest today, she does just that. In today's episode, Chantelle Turner and I discuss how it's never too late to start again. So if you want to learn how to not dwell on the why something happens and figure out what you can do about it so you can start again and have the life you've always wanted, this is the show for you. Chantelle Turner is a #1 best-selling author, speaker, coach. She began her first online brand over 8 years ago, and she was facing a number of challenges in her personal life that limited the time she could spend building her business. Well, she discovered a passion for helping others and has spent years honing and developing her vast internet marketing skills. And since then, she has appeared on numerous stages, spoken on countless podcasts, and is frequently invited to conduct exclusive trainings for top industry leaders. And I'm happy to say that she's my friend. And Chantelle, glad to have you here. Welcome to Life Transformation Radio.
Well, thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So your intro is a lot about your business, and I really want to talk about your life because it's truly extraordinary. And what's a big thing for people is that they have an obstacle and then everything falls apart. And you had a major obstacle and your life, in essence, sort of fell apart, but you got back up and you thrived and you weren't a victim to your circumstance. And I just want to applaud you for that.
Well, thank you. I've always been someone who has been very logical about the way that I handle situations. And I'm a problem solver. So I typically dwell in the emotion of something for just a few minutes. And especially if I can't affect change with the emotions that I'm having, I try to process those and move on and figure out how can I solve this problem or what can I do to make this better. And so being handed what we were, I just kind of looked at that situation and it was, okay, well, let's figure out what we can do.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing to be able to disengage the emotion. So let's just talk about what happened. So at 28, your first and only child had a stroke during birth. And that really stops your life dead in its tracks.
Yeah. So we had a perfect pregnancy. Everything was normal. I was obviously in a healthy age range to have a child, and everything was good. And then I went into labor full term. So I was 38 weeks, 5 days along, normal time to have your baby. And when I went into labor, I was in a lot of pain, but like first time, so probably normal. And we went to the hospital, and that's when things weren't normal anymore. Every time I would have a contraction, my daughter's heart would stop beating. And so they very quickly decided to do an emergency surgery and then a C-section, and they got her out. And then they said, oh, everything's fine. Like, we don't know what was going on, but she's good now. Her APGAR, which is like the test that they do to see how the baby's doing when they're first born, was good. Her scores were good. And they gave her to us. And so we lived a couple hours away from my parents. So my parents came up, my husband's parents came, my brother came. And we were this like blissfully happy family, first grandbaby, first baby for us, obviously. And then her temperature was low and her blood sugar was low, and they couldn't really figure out why. So they took her to the nursery to warm her up. And that's when her pediatrician did his normal rounds. So when you have a baby, the doctor comes and they just check on them when they're first born. And he said, I don't know what's wrong, but something is wrong with this child and it needs to go to the NICU right now. And within 5 minutes of her being up in the NICU, she had what's considered an apneic episode. So she stopped breathing. She turned blue. Luckily, she's in the NICU already. So they're watching her. They revive her right away. And that happened again. And so 3 days of testing to try and figure out what was going on. And eventually they found out that she was having seizures. They found out the cause of the seizures was due to an in utero stroke that she had had somewhere within that 24 hours of birth, likely. Either my going into labor caused her to have a stroke or her stroke caused me to go into labor. We won't know. But that was kind of what was determined. It was presented incredibly poorly to us. The neurologist actually came to our maternity room to tell us what had happened. He had this like red folder of brain scans for MRIs. They're all black and white and they're like slices of the brain. And he opened it up and he circled this really kind of dark spot on the MRI. And he said, "Do you see this dark spot right here? That portion of your child's brain is dead." And that was really shocking. Like, how do you handle that news? I didn't know what that meant. I'm like, does it grow back? Like, I don't know anything about brains. My dad, my mom, my mother-in-law, they're all across from the bed from us. So I can see their reactions, which honestly is worse than having to react yourself, is seeing your parents go through it. And, he said, your child's going to have cerebral palsy. She'll probably have seizures for the rest of her life. And we had questions. We're like, what does that mean? He physically acted out what she might look like if she ever walked, he said. We fired him as our doctor. Obviously, it was terrible. And I saw my dad cry. We spent 11 days total in the NICU until we finally took her home. During that time, we had social workers that said, "Hey, we're applying for this, or we're applying for that for you, or we're going to get you into this support." And of course, we weren't paying a lot of attention. We were trying to figure out how much our life was going to change with a newborn and what cerebral palsy really meant and all of these things, and just even get out of the NICU. And then about 6 months after all of that, we got hit with the medical bills. And my insurance, which was fantastic at the time, did not cover a very large portion of all of that. And they had not applied for the things that they said they would apply for. So even though I had a great job and my husband had a great job, it was time to figure out our financial burden that we needed to take care of. And so that's kind of where things landed.
Wow. Well, my heart goes out to you and your husband and your daughter. And it's so overwhelming. You and I have a similar path in that my daughter was 14 years old and suffered 4 strokes. And, it's absolutely devastating, because I will tell you, the people that were there at the hospital, they just told us the worst. It was the worst. And the one thing that I remember is we prepared for her death 72 times. She was in a coma. They said, "You know what? It's really bad. You need to prepare for the worst. She's probably going to have another stroke and die in the next hour." They did that every hour for 72 hours. It was horrific. And I know there's a lot of people that say kids don't have strokes. Actually, it's more common than you think. There were multiple people in my daughter's high school that actually suffered strokes. And the reason you don't hear about it is that the children don't survive. That's one of the reasons you don't hear about it. So the fact that your daughter's alive and thriving is amazing. And the medical bills are that was more stressful than the fact my daughter had a stroke. They just kept coming in it looked like someone had put me on a spam mail list. And you know what it's like. You're smiling. It's unbelievable. And they're not small little bills. And some are. There's just like a bill for this and bill for this, bill for this, bill for this. And they came in quick. We were there for a couple of weeks and the bills were already coming in. And I'm like, why are these people coming in? And you just saw them. It's overwhelming.
Well, you get one from the hospital. So you're like, oh, here's the bill. And then all of a sudden you get a bill from the doctor. And you're like, but you performed the thing in the hospital. And then the anesthesiologist. And so everybody bills you separate. And it's just, It is this. Oh, yeah. After I think the worst part is that you're already emotionally and mentally exhausted and beat down, obviously from everything you're dealing with, right. Whether it's a spouse or a kid or a family member, whatever, you're already at your lowest point where you have no tolerance. And right. Then all of a sudden when you're at your worst, they're like, here's a bill and another bill that's kind of like this bill and it's for the same thing, but it's this other person that's billing it. And a barrage of constant things.
It became also a full-time job to manage all the payments to everybody. And what was the insurance payment and what was not. And they sent stuff to collections super fast. And I'm like, I didn't even know we had a bill for that. And it was just, it's heartbreaking. Not only are you dealing with the fact that, your newborn child has medical issues and they tell you all these things of what it's not going to be. And, I'm understanding that your daughter's actually thrived and not anywhere close to what they said your future was going to be.
Yeah. So we're really fortunate. Honestly, I spend a lot of time having gratitude, which sounds crazy because why would you be grateful? And I don't mean it that I'm grateful that my child had a stroke. I would not wish that on anyone. But it totally changed my outlook on life and my perspective. And so I am grateful for the way that it has allowed me to view the world today versus who I was and how I viewed the world prior to having her. So you said, right, nobody hears about children having strokes. I literally asked, I was like, is that a thing? I thought old people had strokes. I didn't know that kids could have strokes. Turns out it's common. Very 5% common. Of births. The child has a stroke. Typically, it is not discovered until the child is 3 to 4 years old because a stroke presents very different in a newborn. In a newborn, you haven't learned anything yet. So where a stroke comes along in an adult or even a young, a young adult, and takes away, unfortunately, a portion of their brain that has already learned a whole bunch of things. Our brains are really cool. And so if it hasn't learned something yet, it just kind of finds a new little pathway to go learn that thing. Which also means that she didn't have speech that was affected. Babies, infants don't have a ton of motor skills, especially fine motor, which is most effective. Right. So there's not an easy notice. And truthfully, if she hadn't been having the seizures, we wouldn't have known. And so because our pediatrician said something's wrong, right? Here's all the gratitude. Something's wrong, send her to the NICU. Then she was already in the best place possible to have a seizure and stop breathing. If she had been with us in our recovery room, which is totally normal, who knows what kind of brain damage additionally she could have had because she would have been without oxygen, but they revived her right away. Then because of that, now they've discovered what's going on. And we got really fortunate. The neonatologist, which is the head doctor of the NICU, who was in the NICU with us, she said, you know what? I work in a practice with a woman who her husband is the top neurologist who specializes in neonatal strokes. This is something only one person in the entire Western Hemisphere has, right? This specialty. He's in Phoenix. He's just at a different hospital group, and he doesn't take new clinic patients. He's a hospitalist. He only takes hospital patients. He doesn't clinic, but I'm really good friends and she works in my practice. Let me see if I can get you into him. Something you would do for a family friend that you've known for a lifetime, not random strangers at your job. And she got us into him. And the cool thing about being at the top is that all the other cool people at the top. So you asked, my daughter's doing really well. Well, because we had this incredible neurologist who had all of this knowledge about neonatal strokes. And then he was connected to the best rehabilitation specialist that there is. And so he got us into her. She got us into a trial. My daughter didn't walk till she was 2.5, but she can run and jump and climb playground equipment and all of that today because of the people that were put into our lives. And so I've just had so much gratitude for how things worked out, for the people that went out of their way to help us. And even, we've been in and out of the hospital occasionally with seizures. And unfortunately, the floor of the hospital, whichever hospital we're at, is always a pretty severe area. It's either, depending on the hospital group, it's either the renal failure floor also, or it tends to also be the cancer, childhood cancer floor.
Yeah.
And that puts your life into a lot of perspective.
Yeah.
To be able to be there and know that the other people on that floor will likely never take their child home. And any discomfort that we experience or anything we're going through, that at the end of the day, I would still take my child home. A lot of gratitude right there. It is very humbling. It makes you just grateful for everything that you have and any time that you have.
Yeah, it's amazing how I just got to take a breath because you and I went on the same path, only mine was just 14 years later than what you experienced. Almost to it's amazing just the parallels there. the one thing is the gratitude. My daughter had her stroke. It's just amazing, all the things that fell into place that made her who she is today. And the one thing that I told her when she was going into surgery was, I told her, you are special. There are hundreds of thousands of people that haven't met you yet. You are here for a reason. You are the most incredible human being, and you fight, you fight, you fight, you fight. We got this. We're going to fight. And she did. And what's amazing about it is the doctor that she had wasn't the pediatric neurosurgeon that was supposed to be there. He was actually delayed. He was going to an international conference, our doctor, Dr. David Moss, and he was going to an international conference to talk about all the miraculous things he's discovered for pediatric neurosurgery. And he was there, and he performed the surgery, and she lived. And we had a very similar thing, is that we had a nurse in there, and she said, you know, we just really love you and your wife and your daughter, and we really want the best for you. And she says, I'm going to be bold. I talked to a friend of mine he's a specialist of rehab, and he's opening up a clinic, and he's taking very limited people because he's just starting out. It's kind of this and this and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, okay. And we should have never even crossed paths with this guy. And she's one of the reasons that she is the way she is today, because she went 5 hours a day, 4 days a week, right at the very beginning. And, you know, it was just amazing. And then it's unbelievable how things fall into place. And then the other thing is regarding the cancer. The one thing that, man, I just have never been more grateful to be in the situation I was in. And not saying that I ever want my daughter to have a stroke, but the fact that she had a stroke, she was going to go through whatever she go through. But I remember being on the cancer floor, and you were there. I lived at the hospital, and you walk by, and we were there all the time. My wife and I were in the room all the time, and there was other parents in the room. But I would say 90% of the kids that are in that cancer floor, there's no parents and no one's visiting them. And I said to my nurse, I said, you know, that is so terrible that the parents aren't there to support their kids. And she said, they've been here for months, and they have to go provide for their family. And I'm just like, wow, you know, and then you see the magnitude of just your child in a room, and then the magnitude of the people on the floor, and then the magnitude of the other floors and the building and the other hospitals and the other hospitals around the world. And you're just like, wow, it's a lot.
Yeah. And that really hit us in the NICU. Like you talked about, you know, the parents not being there, and there were 5 or 6 other babies in the NICU, and the entire 11 days that we were there, we saw one other parent that came in maybe twice, and we asked about it. We got to be very friendly with our nurses. In fact, one of the nurses who was our night nurse for almost the entire time, her name was Amy, and she is still a friend today. She was just incredible to us, and would like change her shift around to try and be there when we were there. And it was, you know, just so we had a familiar face, and everyone was so wonderful. But we had asked, you know, there's no other parents here. Like, how could you have an infant, a newborn baby, and not be in the NICU? And I think from the outside, I was a insanely judgy not parent. Like before I became a parent, I was a very judgy non-parent to people that were parents. Like, oh, your kid sleeps in your room and you're tired. Oh, that's your own fault. You allow that, right? Like, oh, I wouldn't give my kid candy if they were throwing a tantrum in the grocery store. It's a very judgy non-parent. And so it's very easy to think, well, I'm here in the NICU. I made the time to be with my kid. Why wouldn't you be here, right? You're up on the cancer floor or whatever. And you're like, how can these parents not be with their kids? Well, it's all these circumstances that you don't think about until you're in that situation, until you are a parent, until you're living it. And it's that some are single parents. Some have multiple kids at home. So who do you pick, right? Do you stay in the NICU 24/7 and not take care of the other kid at home? You know, you have to get to your job. We talked about the medical bills, and they pile up fast, and somebody has to provide. There needs to be a home for that kid to come home to, and a roof and all these things. And so it is, I think that's one of the hardest parts, is to just think like, not only is someone going through this, the child or the parents or whatever, and then in addition to all of that, it's not even the freedom to just be and to just be present. And we were fortunate that we could be in that moment, that we could be there. But most people don't have that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Like I said, I'm so glad that your daughter's doing well. And the one thing that about you, so all of that stress, and it just got to the point of like overwhelmed. So a lot of people would just give up and it's over. And you didn't. You disengaged your emotion, which I think is really incredible that you can do that. And you dug in deep and you said, no, I'm going to dig us out of this hole. And then what did you do?
Yeah, so I'm a fighter. When I get stressed.
No.
It's not obvious.
I thought you're just a little wallflower. Chantelle's a little wallflower. Just kind of just low key and passive and just a wallflower.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely the person that is not going to be a pushover. I ask questions. I push back. So, we were in the middle of obviously getting her into as many therapies as possible. You mentioned getting into therapy right after it happened. And especially, in any case, getting the therapy as soon as possible, but especially for a newborn from 0 to 3 years old, your brain is, they call plastic. It's like the most flexible. I don't know why they call it plastic. But it hasn't learned anything. So your brain's we're not using a lot of it. I think 10% or something. So there's like 90% that's not getting used. So basically your brain's just like, oh, I can't go this way. And I always tell people, because my daughter is a little bit different in the way that her brain thinks about things. And it's because of the stroke. Sometimes it takes her longer to get somewhere. I say, the rest of us are on the freeway and she's just taking the scenic route. So she's still going to get there. It's just going to take a minute. And that's, your brain just like makes these new pathways and stuff. And so while we're trying to get her into as many therapies as possible, we're doing therapy 5 days a week. As you mentioned, we're in PT and OT and speech and music and I don't even remember all the things. And then the medical bills come in and I'm like, okay, now I've tackled the one problem. She's getting help. Okay. Now I have to go tackle the financial problem. Yeah. So I'm like, I don't remember what the hospital said they had applied for, but they said something. Like there was something to apply for, even if they didn't apply. So now I'm on the Google machine trying to figure out like, what can I apply for? And I came across what is the Department of Developmental Disabilities. And it is basically, it's called a little something different in every state, but it is basically in every state. It's state run. State funded. And in Arizona, where we are, it is a pretty decent program. The only problem is it doesn't backdate. So we did qualify for Arizona's DDD program, which allowed them to basically start paying future medical bills, future therapy bills. Right. But there's about $100,000 worth of bills that they were not going to pay for after insurance, that I had to kind of figure out how to take care of. And so, it was a lot of juggling and a lot of balancing and all of that. But I also really found my strength in figuring that out. It's better for me to be fighting a battle than thinking about the problems. I am definitely better off when I'm incredibly busy and overwhelmed is a better state of me than idle. So it kind of worked out.
And so what did you do? So
I got us into DDD so that they would start paying future bills. And then, like I said, I had a good job. My husband had a good job. I was in corporate and he was traveling for work about 80% of the year at the time. So I was mostly single momming it during all of this, which was an added stressor, an added challenge. But I started looking for a way to earn an additional income. And I think a lot of people have probably been down this road, but a friend reached out and was like, hey, I make $400 a month extra with network marketing. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but $400 sounds awesome. Like I could use that. That's bills. Like, yes, please tell me. And so she's like telling me about this thing that she does. And it ended up being a product that I didn't love, that I wasn't passionate about. I tried to do it and I failed miserably. I think where most people have gone with MLMs, the miserable failure. Yeah. And I was like, I'm done. Like that was worse. I spent money to be a part of this thing that didn't work and it stressed me out and it took time away and all of this. And so it got to the point, honestly, where I was so tired, I think emotionally and physically. I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning every single day just to be able to get myself dressed, get my daughter off to daycare, commute an hour and a half to the office, work from 7 a.m. till 3:30, commute an hour and a half back, pick her up, come home, make dinner, go to bed, right? And it was just this cycle. Again, my husband wasn't home most of the time. And I was falling asleep on the freeway, driving to work. Not good, nothing. And I didn't know what to do about it. Drinking, 3 Starbucks a day. And so a second friend reached out and said, hey, there's this stuff that I've been taking and it really helps my energy. I'm like, well, sure. Like what? I will take almost anything at this point, like to not crash my car on the freeway driving to work. And I took it and I felt amazing. And then came you can sell it too. And I was like, no, been down that road, not interested, whatever. But people at work were commenting on how I had more energy, how I looked like kind of back to my old self before I had a baby, how, what are you doing? And so I just started telling people about it. And that business did take off. I didn't intend to join that business, but it took off. And I'm very grateful, honestly, at the end of the day, that I would say over the course of 3 years, doing that completely in my spare time, in my car, basically during commuting to work and home, I built it to where we were able to pay off all of our medical bills. They took us, my husband and I, on multiple vacations that we desperately needed, because when you are going through all of this, you need to get away and do some self-care, which is people were shocked. How could you leave your child? And I'm like, because I'm not a good mom right now. I need to go. I need to refresh me, fill my cup, and come back and be the good mom that my child deserves.
Right.
And that was a blessing for us. And it really was my gateway into entrepreneurship and building a business on the internet. And once I kind of understood that you could make money, like for real, in a legit way on the internet, this was 8 years ago, so that was still kind of sketch. I realized that the people I really wanted to help were other special needs parents that were going through the same stuff that we're going through. And so I founded a brand called Stronger Mommies, and was really focused on helping parents who had kids with special needs, any special needs, get the resources, services, and support that they needed. And I did that for a number of years. I actually still run a group for that, although it's not my main focus. But it was incredibly rewarding. And so I'm kind of grateful, again, for the journey that brought me to that.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you do that, because the one thing that I remember when we were in the hospital is you've never been in the hospital. You've never had a child in the hospital, and you don't even know how to act. Like they keep saying, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And I'm like, I have no idea. Tell me what I need. I don't know what I need. I mean, apparently they said, what you need is a shower. You've been here for 4 days. You need to go home and take a shower. And I'm like, oh, I never even thought of that. It's as simple as that. You just don't know what you need. And so to have someone there to hold your hand and to kind of guide you, because I wouldn't wish having a child, in the hospital for my worst enemy. It is the worst thing as a parent. I don't know about you. I'm sure you did it, but I did it. And it's just like, I would lay in that bed and I would have the strokes and I would be in a coma. And it's just the craziest feeling that you would ever think that, but you would take their place. And it's, you know, as a parent, you want to protect your kids and you want to wave that magic wand and help them and stuff like that. And when it's in the hospital, there's not a whole lot you can do. It's just you're on a roller coaster ride, you're strapped in, and you're going to go through the loops and the valleys and the highs and the lows and the speed turns and all that stuff. And then hopefully you get out in one piece. That's really all there is.
Yeah. And it was honestly just realizing that I wasn't the only person going through this. I think we go through, unfortunately I did, like the very first thought when it all happened was like, why me? Why us? Right? Like, this doesn't happen to me. This is something that happens to other people that I've never even heard of. I think I knew one child growing up that was in my school that had Down syndrome. And that was the closest that I had ever been to a child with any kind of extra needs or different abilities. And to realize that this was like now our life. And I'm like, who in the world even is also going through this? So starting that group and community and helping myself connect with other people that were going through similar experiences. I mean, through that, I've met people that they were a child that went through the same type of stroke, a left middle cerebral artery stroke in utero, and now are grown adults that I can see. Obviously, my daughter's path is going to be different, but it's like this light at the end of the tunnel that this person is successful and happy and healthy and thriving. We can have that too. Whereas you mentioned the doctors give you the worst case scenario. They do not leave you with a lot of hope. And so starting this group and then being able to meet all these people and then being a support for them too and allowing them to connect with each other. I remember when very early on, I had someone reach out to me and she said, I just have to say thank you so much for doing this, because I have made more friends in 10 minutes being a part of your group than I've made in the last 10 years. And I just thought, like, I didn't do anything. Like, I don't even know who this woman is. She's just part of my community. And now she's able to connect with other incredible people. And it truly was so rewarding for me and in so many ways to be a part of that.
You're a catalyst. Look at you. You're a catalyst, and look what you've done. So, and you have an internet marketing business. You're super successful. You're making a difference in people's lives, and I'm thrilled that you have crossed my path, and I'm really happy to call you a friend.
Well, I am so glad that we have met as well, and I agree. It's been a great friendship, and continue to look forward to that.
Chantelle, thanks so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you want to reach Chantelle, you can reach her at notableleader.com. And what's the address for the support for children with strokes? What's that?
It's a Facebook group called Stronger Mommies, plural. Okay. And it's men and women, of course, but had to pick one. So Stronger Mommies was more fitting. But it is a support group of dads and moms and even grandparents of people who have kids with any kind of different ability, extra needs.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here. And thank you so much for your support and taking time out of your busy and precious day to listen. We so appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me, along with my very special guest, Chantelle Turner, to touch your heart, move your soul, and inspire you to live a life of transformation. I'm Rob Actis. Until next time.
This is Life Transformation Radio. Download complete.